We're in the vineyard with Don Lange. Don, tell us about these vines. These are completely different than anything else in Oregon.
Well, years ago in the 90s, I was seeing some mutations take place in Pinot Gris vineyards. First, I saw it in clusters where you'd have the normal Pinot Gris color, which is a dark red, and within that same cluster there would be bright green grapes. At first, I thought those grapes were unripe berries until I tasted one, and it was as ripe as any of the dark berries in that cluster. So at that point I started wondering if we were having some kind of mutation take place in the Pinot Gris. And then, later on, I discovered, there were some plants that had, say, the left side would be all dark red fruit and the right side would be all green fruit. So it's like, wow, that's rather amazing. So what we did at that point was, isolated those vines and took cuttings from those canes that were all green, where the mutation had taken place, and propagated those cuttings, and then planted them here. And in 08 and 09, we got enough fruit off of these 3 rows to make wine. So for the first time, we had a wine that was made solely from that mutated fruit.
And what did you call the wine?
Indigene.
And how did you come up with that name?
Well, as far as we can tell, it's indigenous to the Dundee Hills here.
And you actually got these cuttings from Winters Hill, which is just a few miles from here, right?
Correct, yeah, the original. We saw mutations happening in a lot of different vineyards. I think Yam Hill Vineyards and Freedom Hill Vineyards, I think maybe Durant, if I recollect right, and Winters Hill. And Pete Gladhart was really interested in the sort of the genetics of it, and so we took cuttings from that block in his vineyard and propagated them.
And how many plants do you have? I mean, I see a pretty long row. I can't see the end of the row.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing 300.
So enough that you can make a commercial crop out of it.
Yeah, a few barrels for sure. Yeah, and I mean it's here. We'll continue to look at it, and I think on the palate it seems as though it's not Pinot Blanc, although some would argue that it is Pinot Blanc. I haven't been able to engender enough interest for somebody to do the DNA testing on it. So, maybe at some point we'll do it ourselves if nobody else will do it. But there's a rumor that WSU is interested.
Well, I think it's a rumor. It's a rumor we just started, but we'll see. So you really don't have a name for these grapes. There's no official name. It started out as Pinot Gris.
Exactly. So we had to call it something, and I think it's a really nice wine. I mean, it's won a silver medal. So I guess others are starting to like it as well. So we think this is a viable option here, and we should pursue it. We have a lot of other projects for sure, but I think this is it's a fascinating story in any case.
So what's your nickname for this?
Oh, well, the working title for it was Pinot Pierre.
And how'd you come up with that name?
Well, it's like there was this character that lived around here years ago named Pinot Pete, and Pierre is Pete. So all things Pinot was Pinot. He had a license plate that was Pinot Pete was his license plate. So it was easy enough to call it Pinot Pete. And then it could have come as well from Pete Gladhart. This is another Pinot Pierre.
Right.
So those two Petes in the area.
You've made 2 vintages off this, 2008, 2009, and you've tasted them side by side with Pinot Gris, and they're completely different wines.
Well, we think so. Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when that 09 vintage, which you tasted, granted you didn't have it when it was very young, but when we tasted it, our winemaking team tasted it, in its early days, we thought it was more like Gruner Veltliner than anything else. Certainly more like a Gruner than a Pinot Blanc. Although it's, I mean, you folks had it. It's rounded off a little bit now, and there's maybe more fruits starting to show, and you know, maybe not quite as much minerality, but it's definitely different on the palate.
And how are you making the wine? It sounds like you're putting it in barrel. Are you barrel aging or barrel fermenting? Or
no, we fermented it, in originally in I think they were totes, and then went to barrel. I'm trying to remember if that was indeed barrel fermented. You know, it spent most of its life in barrel because we didn't have any tanks that were that small. So we just don't have very much of it.
Right.
So
what do you think the future of this is? Do you think, I mean, you're talking about a grape that potentially is indigenous to the Dundee Hills.
I don't know. I mean, I for my part, I would surely like to have somebody weigh in on the science. People who know the science weigh in on it, and get some scientific data about this mutation. It's. I mean, there have been lots of mutations in the Pinot family. Starting in Burgundy some hundreds of years ago. With Pinot Gris, that a mutation gave us Pinot Gris. So a mutation of Pinot Gris gave us this. Is it Pinot Blanc? Well, I think maybe not, but we need to determine.
And that's a good point. You talked about how the Pinot family is genetically unstable. And
right.
These things do happen with us.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so... I think it's important to try and find out what the genetic makeup is of this.
And so legally, you can't really call it anything except the Indigene name that you've given it.
Right. Yeah. So we just came up with a name, and it can it's like the world can have that name if it wants.
so this might end up being called Pinot Indigene.
Right. Yeah.
Or Pinot Dundee or something like that.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, yeah.
How long have you guys been in business here?
Well, we're coming into our 25th harvest.
And your son is basically he's the winemaker kind of running the show now?
Well...
I mean, you run the show, you're dad. But...
I'm the executive winemaker now, yeah. I don't tromp up and down these rows as much as I used to. Let's make that perfectly clear.
Right.
But, my wife and I are still involved on a daily basis.
Right. What does Jesse think of this part of the project?
Well, I mean, he's as curious about it as I am, but he's more focused on sales than I am. And he's on a sales trip right now in California. So bless his heart.
So this is a pet project, kind of a hobby for you.
Well,
these three rows.
Yeah, it's not really a hobby, but, I guess
I mean, these three rows, anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's and where we take it from here, I don't know. We're on our estate property, we're pretty much planted out. There's maybe one more acre that we could do. We've got, we were pioneers of Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris, so we fought those battles, and I think there are a lot of people, the older generation around here doesn't have a whole lot of energy for fighting more battles of recognition, if you will. It's like, oh yeah, Indigene. I mean, all of us can remember a time when you go out and say, we've got Oregon Pinot Noir for you, and people say, you grow wine grapes in Oregon? I mean, we fought that battle. And with the Pinot Gris, it was the same thing. I mean, we were the fourth producer of Pinot Gris in the New World, out there in a time when nobody knew anything about it. 1987. So, we've made our case for those varietals, doing it on a big scale with Indigene. Well, that's something else. For me, on the macro level, for our operation, the next battle is Chardonnay. We really feel we're at a level now with the Chardonnays that we could be moving forward with them.
All right. Well, Don, thanks for your time. This is fascinating.
You're welcome, Andy. Thanks for coming.